Okay, fourth graders, today is Tuesday, September 17th, and we are continuing right along to our second to last lesson of Module 1. It is Module 1, Lesson 18, and our learning goal today looks very similar to yesterday with just a couple slight differences. Just like yesterday, we are using tape diagrams to help us solve word problems. The difference today is that we are solving multi-step word problems. I think I wrote two-step on the board, but it's multi-step word problems. Okay, so again, we're using tape diagrams. And today we're going to remind ourselves how we can use estimates to see if our answers are reasonable. Okay. As always, we are going to use the R, D, W method to solve word problems. What does R stand for, everyone?
Read.
What does D stand for?
Draw.
What does W stand for?
Write.
Very good. How can we show that we've read the problem, especially when it's printed in front of us? What could we do? Sanvi? That's right. You can underline what the question's asking. So, for example, in this question here, it's asking how many fewer people went skiing in February compared to January. Underlining it or writing it down is going to help you make sure you understand what the question's asking. Therefore, you can be sure to answer the correct question. You also read the question and show that you've read the question by circling the important information. In this question, we know that altogether, 30,436 people went skiing in both February and January. Then, we know that 16,009 went skiing in February. Okay, that's all the important information. Good. Then we can move on to D, which is draw. What kind of pictures do we draw in math? Tape diagram. Good. So we can show that all together, 30,436 people went skiing in both January and February. Okay. We don't know how many went in January. It doesn't tell us. So January, we don't know. But in February, it does tell us that 16,009 people went skiing in February. So with this tape diagram drawn, how can we find out, how can we write an equation that will help us find out how many people went skiing in January? Anshul?
30,436 minus 16,000.
Very good. Okay. This will help us find out how many people went skiing in January. Go ahead and do the math. So when we do the math, we get 14,427. Is that my final answer? Oh, 14,427 people. Is that my final answer?
No.
No, because the question, if I go back and see what I underlined, it says how many fewer people went skiing in February compared to January. 14,427 people, that's in what month? January. So how can I find out how many fewer people went in February? Or sorry, how many fewer people went in January, I guess, compared to February? I need to subtract, right? I need to take away, I can draw another tape diagram, actually. I can show that this is February's amount, 16,009. And I can show that this is January's amount. It's a little bit less at just 14,427. And all of this extra stuff, that would be the difference, and that's what we're trying to find. Does that make sense? So you can see that when you have different steps in a word problem, you might need to draw multiple tape diagrams to show them. Then, of course, we can subtract 16,009 minus 14,427 to find our answer. Go ahead and do your final calculations. After we do our final calculations, we can see that 1,582 fewer people went skiing in January compared to February. We are trying to figure out how many people were at the fair. Very good. Now see if you can write down step 2. What are all the important informations? When we look at this important information, it tells us how many children there were, how many men there were. Does it tell us how many women there were? No, but can you imagine that that's a very common mistake that people might make? They would just see, 2,872 women. And then they would add up all those numbers to show how many people there were altogether. But would that be correct? No. In order to find out how many people are at the fair, we do have to add up the number of children, men, and women. But do we know the number of women yet? Let's draw a tape diagram that would show the number of women. Go ahead and see if you can do that. Your tape diagram to show the number of women should show that it's the number of men, 49,563, plus an additional 2,872. And then so this shows us that if we want to find the total number of women altogether, what we need to do is we need to add 49,563 with 2,872. And that will give us how many women there were at the fair. Does that make sense? Go ahead and find how many women were at the fair. Now that we know that there were 52,435 women at the fair, how do we find out how many people there were altogether? Well, we have to add up the 22,869 children with the 49,563 men with the 52,000, that's very messy, let me try again, 52,435 women. And all together, that's all the people who are at the fair. Does that make sense? Go ahead and do that addition. By the way, do you see how we had to draw two tape diagrams, one for each step of the problem? Very good. So we can see that there were a total of 124,867 people at the fair. Now the directions also tell us to use estimation to see if our answer is reasonable. So let's do that. How many children were there at the fair? 22,869, right? That's pretty close. Remember the wavy equal signs like that means estimate. It's pretty close to how many thousand people? Let's round it to the nearest thousands. 22,869. That's pretty close to how many thousands? Haruto?
23,000.
23,000, good. Okay. 49,563 is pretty close to how many thousands? Sornima?
50,000.
50,000, okay. And last but not least, 52,435 is pretty close to how many thousands? Arnav?
52,000.
52,000, okay. So now, we should be able to add these pretty easily in our head. What's 23 plus 50, everyone?
73.
73. What's 73 plus 50? 123,000, good. Plus 2,000? What's 123 plus 2?
125,000.
So if I add this up, that's 125,000. Is that pretty close to my actual answer?
Yeah.
So is our actual answer probably reasonable? Absolutely. Again, when we do estimation to check, it should be math that you can do in your head. Does that make sense? Good. So for this question, we can find out the number of basketballs sold by subtracting 4,150 from the number of baseballs because it tells us it sold less basketballs than baseballs. Now, if we know that they sold 21,650 balls altogether, and we know how many baseballs they sold, how many basketballs they sold, and we know that the rest were footballs, and the question's asking us how many footballs, how can we find out how many footballs they sold?
We
Avani?
can minus or
Subtract.
subtract the amount of the basketball and the baseball
Right.
to the total.
So this is another one where we can add up the total number of baseballs and basketballs first, the total number of things that are not footballs, and subtract that from the total of balls that were sold. Make sense? Again, you can see that we read the problem, we drew one or more tape diagrams, and we wrote equations to solve it.